All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the next session of today's Training Industry Leader Talk, L&D's role in building skills-based organizations, brought to you by Accredible Culture Partners, InfoPro Learning, The Regis Company, and Open Sesame. I'm Sarah Gallo, a senior editor here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you all here with us today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items to help you connect with our speaker and get the most out of today's event. Throughout today's event, please feel free to use the chat for comments and submit your questions in the Q&A. We'll address all of your questions either during the event or at the end of the session during the Q&A section. And once this session ends, a brief survey will pop open in your browser. Please take a moment to share feedback on the session and the speaker. All of our sessions are also being recorded and will be archived on our website. And as always, you'll receive a follow-up email from us with a link to the on-demand sessions. If this is your first Training Industry event, we'd like to welcome you. Training Industry exists to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D through live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through resources such as articles on our website, our magazine, conference, research reports, membership, and our podcast. We would also love to hear about what you've learned from today's session on social media. So please make sure to follow us on your favorite platform and let's continue the conversation there. Well, without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Lauren Shapiro is a professional services lead at Accredible, the world's leading digital credential platform. She builds credentialing frameworks for enterprise L&D teams and professional associations across the US and the UK, giving employees something they can actually speak to and giving L&D teams data that holds up in a leadership conversation. So with that, Lauren, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm just going to share my slides now, if that's all right. Meanwhile, welcome everyone. Hoping everybody can see my screen. Thank you so much, Sarah, for the introduction, and thank you all for spending time with us today. As Sarah said, I lead professional services at Accredible and get to spend my days helping those enterprise L&D teams and professional associations turn learning into structured, verifiable skills evidence. And with my background being in both teaching as well as professional services in both ed tech and HR tech, I always like to start with the learner when I am considering how to build programs that stick. And so I'm really excited to share some of that with you today. At Accredible, we work with over 2,300 organizations from universities and professional associations to some of the largest enterprise L&D programs in the world. What's important for today's conversation is that we work really with those high stakes programs that are delivering at serious scale, organizations where credentials aren't participation ribbons, they are that structured evidence of real capability. So for example, Walmart Academy has issued over 650,000 credentials through Accredible, and each one of those is tied to the American Council on Education college credit recommendations. Additionally, we work with Lowe's, which you'll hear more about in a moment, who built their advanced leadership program on the same design principles that we're going to walk through today. So these programs are where the framework I'm sharing really comes from. So let's jump into that. I want you to imagine the following scenario. I'm hoping this will be a familiar one for some of you. You've been running a leadership development program. People are completing it. You have skills mapped to those courses that you're running. You're doing all the right things. But now there's a role to fill, and leadership wants to know if it's possible to promote from within. And you're being asked who are the hidden gems in the organization, who may be overlooked and ready for more. They want to know who's been through your program and is ready. My question for you is, does your current data help you answer that question? If you are like many of the organizations we work with, you probably have lots of completion statistics and course hours. But what if that course was months ago? What if they don't have the opportunity to apply those skills in their daily role? The program may have helped them gain some of those skills, but the program's now over. So are those skills still relevant? Are they doing all the things that they need to be able to apply them currently? And really getting answers to that question is what our session today is all about. So I'd like to start by getting to know you a bit better. So we're going to launch a poll. I think Sarah is going to launch that now. Great. So I'd love to know how you would describe the way your organization currently recognizes employee learning and skills development. So are you tracking your completions in your LMS? Do you issue certificates or badges, but maybe they don't carry that structured skills data? Or do you issue credentials, those certificates and badges with the defined skills and assessment criteria attached? Or maybe you're you have credentials plus pathways that connect learning to next steps, or maybe you're just getting started and you don't have a formal recognition program yet, and that's why you're here today. And all of those are great answers. I can see we have a real mix from what I'm seeing in the poll. I can see that quite a lot of people, around 42% so far, are tracking your completions in your LMS. But employees don't necessarily see that that portable credential. And that's really great to know. And some people, it does look like you issue some badges and credentials. And so there's a lot of opportunity here for us to talk about where credentials can support, how they can help, and I hope that we can go through all of that today. So I will very quickly share the results. There's a real nice mix of everybody across the board. And then I'm going to just jump back to my slide. So I am someone who believes that professional services should always be rooted in research. And I wanted to start with a statistic which I found rather striking, which is according to research from the Boston Consulting Group, only 4% of L&D leaders report on the outcomes of their programs in terms of business results or talent outcomes. Now, when we talk about business results, what I'm referring to is specifically measurable outcomes. So productivity improvement, time to competency for new hires, reduction in error rates, retention of people who went through the development versus those that didn't, revenue. These metrics aren't always easy for L&D to provide. They require a lot more than surveys or completion rates. And I promise that by the end of today, I will provide an example of analytics that were pulled from Accredible to go and work alongside that talent capability data to really give those insights of where there was more benefit for their program in terms of those business outcomes. But mostly today, I'm going to be talking about talent outcomes. And what I mean by that is demonstrated capability. So not just the person completed this leadership program, but this person has demonstrated these specific skills at this level in this context. So it's the difference really between that completion record and that capability evidence base. But back to that statistic, what shocked me is 96% of L&D teams are reporting on something other than those two things. And that may be activity, hours, scores, completions. And I hope today I can show you how credentials can be designed to produce that capability evidence that works alongside all of those other metrics. And so really look at how you can redesign your learning program from the employee backwards in terms of your credential, so that your credential really verifies not just what the employee can do, or not just what the employee completed, but also what they can do. We'll also look at a three-stage model to turn those course completions into demonstrated capability and usable skills data, and we'll apply a 5-point program audit to pinpoint where your current program could be optimized and where you can start. So, is a credential enough to answer that leadership readiness question? That depends entirely on how it was built. And I want to show you what I mean by that. So, I want to start with an example where the credential is enough. The Advanced Leadership Program for Aspiring Leaders is a 3-month cohort experience that was created by Lowe's. During this program, a group of 36 individual contributors from across the organization are brought together to learn and reflect on topics that are intended to grow their capability as a future Lowe's people leader. So they use a variety of methodologies, things like facilitator-led virtual and in-person sessions that are often presented in partnership with their executive leadership team. Um, they also work with partners, including a business school. They use leadership assessments. They use group coaching. They use action learning, which what they mean by that is a management simulation. And the goal is that the performance outcomes will prepare managers for their next role at Lowe's and are aligned to specific skills, namely leading self, leading teams, and leading business. So I wanted to look closely at how it was designed, and it was designed from the content, not from the content outward, but rather from the earner backwards. So it wasn't what will we teach, it was what does this person need to be able to say, to show, and to do as a future Lowe's people leader. What I really loved, though, was what then came out on LinkedIn from one of their earners. And if you look at that post, which there's that screen grab right in the middle, she didn't write, I completed a training program. She wrote about being pushed out of her comfort zone. She wrote about growing as a leader, about value of meaningful connections, and what she's going to do with that learning. And she has that language now for her own development. She can articulate what she built across those 3 domains of leading herself, showing up for her team, understanding the business more deeply, because the program was really designed to give her that. And that's that earner backwards design in action. So the credential helped give her that language because the design did it so beautifully. And the result is there on the right-hand side of the slide. She ended up being promoted into a new role at Lowe's. And so the learning was real, the capability was real, the articulation was real, and the outcome followed. So is a credential enough? In this case, yes, because of how the program behind it was built. So let's look at some ways you can do that with those credentials. So there's obviously the difference between learning a skill and applying it. You can design your program so the credential doesn't just verify learning, but evidences application. And that's when you've done that, that's when you have something that goes well beyond a completion record. Because that kind of data can answer the readiness question. That can show up in a talent planning meeting, that can live in a skills directory that your CHRO or CPO can query, and that can make a case for an individual without you having to be in the room. And so that's really the shift from completion data to capability evidence that I want to talk about today, and specifically how credentials can help that. So most credentials are built from a single question. What did we teach? Let's record that. But given you're already starting with the end in mind for your instructional design, why are we not doing that with the credential? And a lot of that comes down to when credentials are introduced into the process. So most organizations get a credentialing program and already have all the insight about their course because it's likely already built. So what their subject matter experts have delivered is there. They know what the learner had to do to earn the credential or complete the course. They know what skills they're demonstrating, and the program's been completely built around that. So when they go to design the credential, they capture that and put that in. And the credential often only ends up describing what was delivered, which is really that program outward design. And again, it's designed like this because it's added as a receipt of learning at the end. But if you're only using them as proof of completion, then you're missing the opportunity to collect the valuable analytics that can help you when having those conversations with leadership. And the earner backwards design with credentialing starts with a different question, which is very much the same question you're asking with your instructional design. What does this person need to be able to say, to show, to do? So not just what do we teach, but what does the earner need to be able to demonstrate? And since you've already likely designed the program to develop those capabilities and the assessment or the project to verify them, you just need to design the credential to evidence them. And when you do that, it changes what the credential captures, what the earner walks away with and is able to say about themselves, and then critically what you as an L&D team have to show for that investment. So basically, what we're trying to do is produce that capability evidence base. And once you are able to do that, you can answer the leadership readiness question, you can feed that skills directory, and you can make those talent planning conversations easier to have. So the metric that matters here is not just how many people completed our program, but and how many credentials have we issued, but what can people who've completed this program now demonstrate at what level and how is that verified? And that's meaningful data to demonstrate impact. So one way to do this is the three-stage pathway model. This model was really built on a straightforward principle, which is if you want evidence of application, you have to design for it explicitly. And one way to do that is to build a credential pathway, essentially three credentials that follow on from one another. So that first credential, that stage one credential, is likely what you may already have in your LMS. That's the credential that if you're issuing a certificate or a badge at the end of your program, it's demonstrating that the competence was assessed and it was verified. So stage one is very legitimate. It's very necessary. That's the program delivering something real. The person has learned something. The credential is recording that. But when you stop at stage one, you have that record of what someone has completed. And that record, no matter how well designed, no matter how many skills tags it carries, is still just that record of learning, not a record of doing. So when your leadership team then asks, is this person ready for an evolving role? The record of learning may not be enough. They may want to know whether that person has applied that learning, whether it's translated into behavior in their day-to-day job, and whether that capability is real in context. And stage one gives you the answer to what they learned, where the next stage of the credentialing is really about what can they do. And that requires a slightly different design. So stage two could be issued automatically at the completion of stage one, and it can be really simple. It's just about the earner reflecting. And so having a reflection credential is absolutely key because their commitments that the earner is making to do something with this learning. So what skills did I develop? How did I intend to apply them? Where specifically will I do that? And this then can directly improve your metrics because right now, when someone completes your leadership program, that learning's private. It exists in the earner's head, but you have no visibility into how they're thinking about what they've developed, whether they have the language for it, whether they intend to do anything with it. The credential records the learning, but it doesn't capture the learner's relationship to that learning. Where stage two changes that because when the earner starts answering those questions, you have data now which didn't exist before. You know which skills they identified as significant, which in its own form is learning evidence. You know where they intend to apply that learning, and you have commitment, a specific named context that you can return to go and look at whether or not it has been applied. So then this is a whole different class of data. It's now doing something really important for the earner because the skill moves it from being something that they privately know to something they can speak to. Oftentimes, we find that articulating those skills is often one of the hardest pieces. And going and having that skills literacy is so key. Whereas going and making this commitment, going and doing this reflecting gives the earner the language to talk about their credential, to talk about those skills in a leadership conversation, in an interview for an internal role, in a performance review. And that's what we saw happen with that Lowe's credential. The metric that stage two adds is really documenting that learning intent, which combined with stage one data, you now have this person has demonstrated these skills and has articulated how they will apply them in this specific context. And that's starting to really answer that readiness question. So stage three, this is really the answer to the limitation that I named earlier, that gap between learning a skill and applying it. The capstone credential, or this final credential in the series, in the pathway, is earned by submitting evidence of that skill applied in practice. So it's proof that that thing that they committed to in stage two has actually happened. So a real piece of work where their learning was applied that can be evaluated against your internal criteria. And basically, this is that Kirkpatrick level 3 built into the structure of the credential. So behavior change isn't hoped for after the fact. It's actually a condition for earning that capstone credential. And what it produces for you as an L&D team becomes really meaningful data because you now know not just who has completed your course, not just whether or not they can articulate those skills, whether or not they intend to apply it, but who actually has taken that leap and actually used it in context, and to what standard. And it's providing you with all that information that you need to build a capability evidence base. So when I go back to that leadership readiness questions scenario that I posed at the start, are these specific people ready for roles that require capabilities that their current job hasn't given them the opportunity to demonstrate? Stage three could change your answer because the current job may not have given them the opportunity, but the program may have, and they may have found creative contexts in which to apply that because they had to reflect on it, because they had to think about what they were going to do with it. And that credential then carries that proof of capability. And when you have that at scale across a program, across multiple programs, across a cohort, suddenly you have the beginning of a skills directory that your organization can use. So the question is, where is your program now and where do you start? One of the things that I like to do is I always like to give people something they can reflect on. So we've put together this 5-question audit, and each of these questions will help you sort of determine what you may want to think about as a next step. So my first question here is all about skill mapping. So was this program built from defined skills or competencies, or was it attached to an existing course? Because if you started with content and worked forward to the credential is likely describing that completion rather than the capability. And that's perfectly fine, as we discussed, that is stage one credential, but it might be the perfect opportunity to add this credential to a 3-stage pathway that allows then for that reflection and for that evidence to be added. The second question is about what the credential contains. So does the credential show what the earner can do? Does it show at what level? Does it show how it was assessed? So if a stranger clicked through to your credential right now, would they understand that what this person has demonstrated? And if not, the credential can't really do its job in a leadership conversation or in a talent planning system. So it may just be worth checking what you've included in your credential metadata. And if you haven't heard that term credential metadata before, what I mean by that is instead of the credential just being the badge or the certificate that people are seeing, it's all the information that lives below that in a digital credential. So when I click through to it, what do I see? I might see a description. I might see earning criteria. I might see skills that are linked to it. I might see evidence. I might see a whole range of various things, learning objectives, etc. And it just means that going and reflecting on if you are using digital credentials, what are you putting in that detail that somebody's going to click through to learn more? That may be a good place to start. My third question is all about earner language. So does your credential help the earner articulate that skill? Or does it just describe the program that they attended? An earner who can't explain what their credential means isn't going to use it when they're in that promotion conversation. So if you don't have this built in, again, adding in that reflection credential could be a really quick win. My fourth question is around next steps. So is there a designed next step when they complete the program? So this is the question that I would say connects most directly with a skills directory, because a pathway is what makes the single credential part of a larger capability map. And without it, credentials can really be isolated data points, where with it, they become progression that makes the data useful for talent planning, for succession, for internal mobility. So you can consider if this makes sense for your organization. And my fifth question is about application. So does the credential allow them to attach evidence of how they applied this? So this is that step that allows them to apply the learning beyond the program. And many credential platforms allow you to attach evidence, which can be such a game changer for seeing not just who has completed the program, but who's applying those skills practically, to what extent, etc. So these questions can give you that really clear picture of where you can start to take your credentials to the next level. So make sure you have your skills referenced in your credential. Make sure you're providing that earning criteria. Make sure you're giving the earner that opportunity for reflection, and think about designing a next step. And each one of those changes is just going to provide you with better data to bring into the talent planning conversations you may need to have. So I want to come back to where I had started. In the hypothetical scenario, I posed the question that your leadership team was asking was, do you have your people who have completed your program have capabilities now that they didn't have before? Can you show me? Whether a credential is enough to answer that question depends entirely on how it was designed. And that 4% stat that I shared at the beginning, that only 4% of L&D teams are reporting on business results or talent outcomes, that is really that design challenge. And I'd encourage you all to leave today to run the audit on one of your credential programs and to start there. And just to finish off, I promised you I would go and I would share a little bit about business outcomes as well. Given you're here at an L&D session, and I'm sure you already know Kirkpatrick and his theories, I just wanted to share next something that shows us what it looks like when you design the credential to generate level 3 and 4 evidence automatically rather than going and looking for it afterwards. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about a company called Toast. If you've been to a restaurant in the last few years and tapped a screen in order to pay, there's probably a good chance you've used their technology. Toast builds point of sale, sorry, and restaurant management software. It's like a lot of fast-growing tech companies, in that they had a product that was getting more and more complex, a customer base that was growing fast, and thousands of employees and vendor technicians who needed to be able to use and support their platform confidently, consistently, and quickly. So they built a training program. They had onboarding. They had people completing all sorts of things. The problem was that the completion didn't tell them enough that was useful. Someone could finish a module and could still not be able to do the job. So they really needed a shared definition of what ready actually looked like. Um, and so as with many L&D teams, that evidence was their gap, was to be able to say, like, who this person has demonstrated the skill at this level in this product domain. They wanted to be able to measure who was capable. So they built something different. And what they built maps almost exactly to the model that I walked you through today. 3 stages that represent the shift from credentialing as an admin function to credentialing as a strategic one. So the credential, the reflection, and the evidence. So Toast designed a 2-tier credentialing framework, foundational and advanced, that mapped to every major product suite. Foundational covered all their core workflows and troubleshooting. Advanced covered the more complex cross-module scenarios. And the learning happened in their Toast classroom. So they had live expert-led sessions, they had on-demand content, they had office hours. And when someone completed it and passed it, they earned a verifiable digital badge that you can see on the screen. So this was their credential that was really tied to that demonstrated capability. And what they found was when they got that stage one right, that their people really started to engage differently with their own development. So that credential being specific, because it said the skill, the level, the domain, the earners could actually speak to it and they could walk into a performance conversation and say, hey, I hold this, this is what it means. And they could share it, they could point to it, and it became a reference point for how they thought about where they were within the organization and where they wanted to go. But what Toast did that was really nice was their certification required completing a project-based assessment that was evaluated by subject matter experts. So you can't complete that project-based task without stopping to apply, to contextualize, to demonstrate. And that reflection didn't become a separate step that happened afterwards. It was actually built into the assessment design itself. And because this was the company-wide program and a shared standard across every product domain, there was this collective dimension to it. So everyone was working towards that same definition of capability. The credential created this real common language, and the reflection that happened on the way through became a structural point for them as well to go and make sure that that learning was being able to be articulated. And Toast saw such a critical result because credentialed new hires weren't just completing their training faster, they were meeting or exceeding their scorecard goals basically immediately after enablement. Um, and it was not because they just finished the courses, it was because they understood what they were working towards, and that credential again gave them something concrete to measure themselves against. So this is really where I think it gets interesting in terms of the business results if you have to justify your L&D budget, because before this program, the new hires at Toast took around 90 days to reach full productivity. And after credentialed learning pathways, that shifted. And in some product domains, employees were reaching productivity 6 to 19 days after enablement, which was 45 days faster. And they issued over 7,000 badges and didn't stop at their internal teams. They actually required their vendor technicians, their external partners who install and support the platform on Toast's behalf, to also complete the 7 foundational product certifications before they could go out and do that work. And the result was a 97% completion and pass rate, but the business impact was their customer effort score hit 6.56 out of 7, which was the highest they had recorded all year. So they not only had the capability evidence within their talent pool, but which they, by the way, they created a spotlight directory using one of Accredible's tools and kept it private. So they now have this directory of skills they could search, but they also were able to go and demonstrate the business impact. And you can see here that number changed hugely. It had an impact on the customers directly. And this is that real Toast credential. So this is their design systems champion. And just look at their earning criteria. So when I say this is the example of the metadata, when I said before, think about it like an iceberg. Here's the beautiful badge that sits above the water, and here's all the metadata that sits below it when you click on it. So you can see here they have specifically mentioned that earning criteria, that they had to demonstrate skill, that they were required to complete a project-based assessment showcasing their skills in accessibility, internationalization, design evaluation, and interaction design, and that it's evaluated by SMEs. So they had very specific skill tags. The expiry date tells you it has to be re-earned. So this credential's been designed to really give them that specific thing to work towards, to reflect on, to apply practically. And they got it right because they designed for capability from the start. The reflections built into the assessment process itself, the evidence is in the outcome, and that project-based assessment, which can then be attached as evidence to the credential down the road. And then they were able to build out that skills directory that pulled the skills from the credentials into a private searchable database. So again, very practical for ongoing conversations with leadership, ensuring that they have that skill-ready workforce, but also very practical for conversations around talent planning. So I'd love to just finish off by asking you one question, which is, is there something today that you will take away and try? I'm just going to stop sharing.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lauren. We do have time for some questions. Let's see. Lots of questions in here for you. Let's start with this one from Abba, who wrote in relating to stage 3. What is the best way to capture evidence from a group of, say, 20 people who have gone through a training program? How would you say is the best way to capture this evidence?
So, depending on if you're using a credentialing platform, a lot of credentialing platforms will have a way to allow the participants to upload the evidence right to the credential, which then means not only is it captured for the learning and development team, but it's also captured for anybody who looks at that credential. So if somebody from leadership wanted to see that evidence in practice, they can go and they can immediately see it. I that's what I would say about that.
Awesome. Sounds great. Um, a lot of questions about evidence. So this one is from Blake, who wants to know what would suffice specifically as evidence of skills applied in practice. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit on what that looks like.
I think it depends on what you're going and trying to demonstrate in terms of the skill. I've seen, one organization was actually trying to show, um, gosh, I'd love to pull it up because I think it's such a great example. Um, Let me do that right now. But they were trying to show teamwork. And it's such a soft skill. And how do you show evidence of teamwork? And there are so many different ways that you can do that. And what they did was they actually created a challenge where people had to work together and they videoed it and they actually attached that evidence to the credential. So, it could be here's a cross-departmental project that I am working on where teamwork is really required. Here are the specific things that I'm going and evidencing to be able to demonstrate that. Now, that's a soft skill. It depends genuinely on what it is that you are looking to go and recognize as a skill because every skill is different. The evidence would be different depending upon that. So it really, I suppose it's about going and finding the right assessment method, the right practical task to go and apply it to. And so much of that evidence, I would say, if you're asking people to go and apply it in their daily work, it's going to depend on what opportunities they have in front of them. And so it could be something like that you go and you say, hey, go have a conversation with your line manager. Here's the skills that you have walked away with. Why don't you have a conversation about the practical opportunities you'll have to be able to demonstrate this in the work that you currently have assigned? Or if you don't, is there the stretch project that you could be attached to that would allow you to go and be able to apply that skill and think maybe cross departmentally where something may be able to occur?
Definitely. Great points. This next question came in. For stage 3, does the evidence of application need to be real application in the workplace, or could it be in a simulated environment?
I think that's up to you. I think that it's one of those things that it really depends on if there is that opportunity for them to apply it on the job. If they're working in a situation where they're trying to demonstrate leadership, but they don't have the opportunity to lead others, a simulated opportunity might be a great way of doing that. So I do think that it really does depend. Obviously, going and having those simulated opportunities or even just a mock scenario can be really helpful. It's up to you how you go and you decide to do that.
Perfect. We have time for a few more. For organizations that already have a large portfolio of credentials, where can you start?
I think that's a great question because we work with a lot of organizations that have huge credential portfolios. And if you have credentials that are, upwards of 1,000 credentials that you're issuing, it can be really intimidating. And so for those, I would always say start with what you're currently working on in terms of a couple of key courses or programs. Use those as your proof of concept to test out, what happens when I go and add an additional reflection credential or I add in a third credential where they have to submit evidence to be able to earn it, and see if that gives you the data that you're looking for to be able to justify doing that at larger scale. But I'd always say start small, prove it with your proof of concept that you have really meaningful data that's useful, and then go from there to be able to justify any additional work that is needed.
Awesome. All right, let's wrap things up with one last question. What would you do if you have a program owner who's proud of an existing credential and resistant to redesigning?
I would say that usually when you have something like that, there is a reason they're so proud of it. And I think what's nice about this design is you don't need to redesign what they've initially built. It works as the first credential in the pathway. I would be pulling them in and saying, let's think about what questions do we want to ask to prompt that reflection? Because really going and saying, how would you apply this is probably not going to get you the best reflection out of the different things you could be doing. If you start to go and think in more detail about, well, what is it that we've had them go and demonstrate? How has that changed the way you've approached a challenge that you came across recently? That's going to give you that much richer detail in that reflection that will be more useful to talk about when you're looking at one, whether or not they can articulate what they've learned, and two, how that is working across contexts. And if it's all right, so I do have one last slide that I just want
Go
to leave
ahead.
everybody with.
Sure
So
thing.
I'm just going to very quickly replace this share. And I just wanted to mention that um, at Accredible, one of the things that I was involved in when I first joined was building out this credential program assessment. This is a free self-assessment that we have available if you want to just take a look at where your current credentialing program stands. It looks at 4 layers of credentialing trust. And so it really goes and it breaks it down into, you know, is your design encouraging people to actually open it? Are you getting the messages right to get people to share their credentials? Are people viewing them and verifying them? And then also, do you actually have the foundations in place to not only ensure that you've got a great credentialing program in place at the start, but one that can scale with your organization? And so it asks a number of questions, takes about 5 minutes to complete. The QR code will take you right to the site if you do want to go and try it out and see how your program is working, and it'll give you some top tips of things you can do next as well. So just something to think about if you would like to know any more. And if you want to know any more about Accredible, please do visit our website. So
All
thank you so
right.
much, everyone.
With that, thank you so much, Lauren. That was great. And everyone will be taking a brief 15-minute break at this point. But up next, we have Vince Martinez for their session sponsored by Culture Partners, Why Skill Building Isn't Driving Results. So I hope you will all stick around for our next session, which will begin right at the top of the hour.